Jennifer Rae Perry was a 13-year-old from Marathon, Florida. She had a brother and sister and could be a wild child. On the night of July 30th, 1993, Jennifer and her mother got into an argument in the street. Jennifer stormed off. Her mother believed she walked to Jennifer's sister's. Jennifer never arrived. She was never seen again. I'm Ed Dentzel, and this is Unfound. Although my general mantra for quite a while has been that we really don't cover child disappearances on Unfound, due to reasons I've mentioned many times, in preparation for this episode, I discovered that we've covered more cases than I would have ever expected. For girls, we've featured Kimberly Norwood, Brandy Myers, Mikkel Biggs, and very recently, Leanne Hosberg. And there are at least a few more. For boys, the list is a lot shorter. Why is that? I really don't know. That's just how it's worked out. Who is this young man? Lucas Degerness from Canada. Yet, despite my surprise at the list being longer than I thought, I don't anticipate my general guidelines changing. I will continue to be very, very picky. Once again, for reasons I've discussed many times. Well, today we have the disappearance of Jennifer Perry. And I think you'll understand very quickly why I accepted the chance to cover this case. And why I kind of once again am breaking the rules. And now a summary of the case. This is brought to you by my friend Megan Linez's website, charlieproject.org. Jennifer Perry, from all accounts, from her mother to her brother to her sister, was a handful. Jennifer ran away many times, most of the time going to her older sister's place, who was already living on her own at 17. Jennifer made several allegations to authorities regarding her mother over the 2 years before her disappearance, but then recanted each time when questioned further. Then in 1992, Jennifer was sent to a sheriff's ranch for children with behavior problems. And by all accounts, Jennifer seemingly had changed when she returned to Marathon in 1993. So at 10 p.m. on July 30th, 1993, Jennifer was down the street talking to a boy who was in Marathon for the summer with his parents. It was curfew, so her mother expected Jennifer to come home. 2 times, Jennifer's mother, Sue, went out to try to get Jennifer to come inside. Jennifer resisted. During the second time, Jennifer swore at her mother and stormed off, and out of sight. Like all the other times, Sue took for granted that Jennifer was heading to the sisters. It wasn't until the next day that Sue discovered Jennifer never arrived. Despite many rumors in the small island town, none of them panned out. Jennifer was never seen again. Over the next 20 years, the Monroe County Sheriff's Office investigated many sightings of Jennifer, both inside and outside Florida. None of those women proved to be Jennifer. Many of you have known for a while that I would be covering Jennifer's disappearance due to the FOIA that I got on her case last summer. I would be talking about the file later in this episode. Until then, please listen to the interview and try to answer these 3 questions. Number 1, what would it take for a 13-year-old to run away, grow up, and still be alive in 2022? Number 2, what are we to make of some of the deputies in Monroe County at the time who went on to live shady lives, including the original investigator? And number 3, in the last 40 years, Jennifer is the only minor to still be missing in Monroe County. Does this rule out a local pedophile and or sex trafficking? Jennifer's family firmly believes foul play occurred. The guest for this episode is Jennifer's sister, Angela Perry. Unfound News. Did all of you catch my appearance on the News Nation Now TV show in your area? It was kind of on quick notice, but I was more than happy to talk about Rashawn Francis's disappearance. I thank News Nation Now for their coverage of Rashawn's case. Next, please be looking for another Unfound Now this coming weekend. Yes, it's that time again. A month has gone by since the last one. As usual, the episode will be posted on the Unfound Podcast channel on YouTube. Finally, some of you may already know that I made a sudden trip to Pennsylvania to see my dad. This is why the podcast will sound a little different for the next few episodes. Dad is fine. I don't want any of you to worry. I'm just going to be a chauffeur for the next month or so. Where you can find Unfound. Unfound supports accounts on iTunes, Pandora, Audible, Podomatic, Spotify, iHeart, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Deezer, and YouTube. Speaking of YouTube, on Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern, please join us for the Unfound Live Show. Watch, ask questions, and give the show a thumbs up. Contribute to Unfound at patreon.com/Unfound Podcast. You can also contribute at PayPal, paypal.me/Unfound Podcast. I also need to give a huge shout out to all the people who have monetarily contributed using SuperChat during the live show on Wednesday nights. Thank you for watching, and thank you for donating. The email address, unfoundpodcast@gmail.com. Merchandise, the books at amazon.com in both ebook and print form. Do not forget the reviews. The website, theunfoundpodcast.com. And please mention Unfound at all true crime websites and forums. Thank you. I'm so happy to have on this episode of Unfound the sister of Jennifer Perry, Angela Perry. Angela, welcome to Unfound.
Thank you very much.
Now, I know the listeners, of course, know that I've been talking to you and your mother for a while now, about 6-7 months since the summer of 2021. We're doing this interview on January 10th of 2022, so I think we've gotten to know each other fairly well, although we've not met in person. And so I know that you are the older sister of Jennifer, and I believe you were 18 years old when she went missing. What are some of your memories of Jennifer, maybe before you moved out? What can you tell the listeners about her?
I was actually 17 when she went missing.
Okay.
Yeah. Jennifer was full of life. She loved to dance. She loved to get together with her friends. She was just a happy girl. I mean, she was a typical 13-year-old that, we all get into our little, life, experience and stuff like that. But for the most part, her and I got along real great, Yeah, she was just a typical 13-year-old, and she just liked hanging out, She did very well in school. She made all A's. So she was very smart girl.
What was it like, and this is maybe kind of a unique situation for this disappearance, in that this disappearance occurs in Marathon, Florida, which is out what we would call the Keys of Florida, down there, the chain of islands connected by that highway, and that it's kind of a unique situation. I know you do not live there anymore. How did that affect some of your upbringing?
As what do you mean? How did it
Just,
affect my
well,
upbringing?
very unique situation living out there. Kind of a small town, but,
Yeah,
so far, I guess, away from the mainland. Um, kind of a touristy spot, I would think. How did that
yeah.
affect? What fun did you find to do as kids out there?
Well, I mean, my mom moved us down there when I was 13. So, and Jennifer would have been, let's see, well, she was 5 years younger than I am. So I don't know the math
Mm-hmm.
on that right off the top.
Okay.
So, I mean, and we were born and raised in the city. So moving down to a small little island was kind of a big adjustment for all of us. So, but
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for the most part, for fun, just hanging out with friends. They did have a little small movie theater. There was a public pool, the Ferro Blanco. We would go there often.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, me personally, we did a lot of bridge jumping.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Jumping off the
yeah,
bridges into the water,
yeah,
into the Gulf.
yeah. There were certain ones that we could jump off where it was safe enough, where we could jump if you knew how. So, and yeah, that was always fun.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, other than that, that was, I mean, marathon, there really wasn't much for teenagers to do, honestly.
Yeah,
So,
that's what I was thinking too. So,
yeah.
okay. All right, so you were there. You weren't there. You weren't born there. You were raised there. You moved there when you were 13. I guess she would have been 9 at the time.
Yeah, yeah.
And let's just talk about some of these things. And we realized that at the time of her disappearance, you did not live at home anymore. In fact, you'd moved out. I guess what would be considered a very young age. You were already out of the house at 17. But Jennifer would come over to your house, maybe after having problems with Sue. Can you explain some of those? Do you remember some of those situations and how they would arise in your side of it?
Well, she'd just come to the house if my mom and her guy kind of got into it. She'd come over, and my mom knew she'd come over to the house, and she'd spend a couple of days, to give it time to cool down, and then she'd go back home. And whenever she came over, it was just like, okay, she was just hanging out. We really didn't discuss anything. We just hung out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And how long would she stay? Would she just till the next day, or would you kind
Yeah,
of have to
sometimes
be?
just the night.
Would
Yeah,
you have to
sometimes.
be like a diplomat? Would you have to call your mother and kind of work things out between the two? What was the situation?
No, because my mom would always. She knew when my sister would go, and my mom would just come over the next day.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, after the first few times, she just kind of, my mom had told you, whenever she would take off, she would always come to my house. So she
Right.
knew my sister was coming there, so she would just give it a day, and she'd come over and come get her and take her home, and
Okay. All right. So she would come over, and just the way you remember it. I realize this disappearance is now 29 years old, but how many times would you say that she came over to your house in a particular situation like this? Because this seems to be the situation for a disappearance. Of course, she did not end up at your house, but in the past year, how many times would you say this had happened? Just a guess.
I want to say like about 3 or 4 times. They didn't argue often. It wasn't like an all the time thing. It was just
Yeah.
mostly when, she's 13, kids don't get their way. What do? They take off. They walk away. She was just one of those type of things. My mom was very protective of us girls, especially. So
Yeah.
Jennifer would want to go somewhere, like to, somewhere where my mom knew there would probably be some trouble. Jennifer, and my mom would say, no, you couldn't go. And Jennifer would, take off.
All right. Okay. She would storm out of there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how far did you live from your mother's place at the time this was going on?
Not far. I want to say maybe a mile and a half. Wasn't
Okay.
far.
All right. And so I guess Jennifer would have walked that many times.
Just walk. Yeah. That was our thing. We would walk everywhere, down there. And it didn't take us long to get to where we needed to go. There was really no need for us to have a car. So it was,
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And my understanding is to be able to walk that distance, you actually had to go out to the highway, to Highway 1.
Yeah, but it was like I mean, if anybody's ever been to the Keys, it's one way in, one way out. So, I mean, the roads weren't even that busy, so it was all locals. Everybody knew each other. So, you know, they had the sidewalk. You walk on the sidewalk.
Yeah. Okay. Now, you know, and the listeners should know, and I'll be talking about this a little bit later in this episode, that, of course, the plan was also to talk to Jennifer's mother, but she has had some health issues, and I'm not going to reveal what those health issues are. That would be wrong of me to do. But she fully supports Angela doing this interview, but I will pass along to the listeners later some of the conversations that I had with Sue from my notes that I took extensively starting, of course, last summer. But, you know, of course, in talking to your mother, and of course you know about this too, Jennifer did seem to have some, what I would call, and you see it in the outline that I made for this discussion, some discipline issues. She was sent away for a time. Now, at the time, were you aware of them? And now I know that, of course, now in 2022, you are a mother. How do you look back at that situation that was going on in 1992, 1993? Your impressions then and your impressions now.
Well, my impressions then was, you know, I just figured she was just being a typical teenager. Yes, she had, her, you know, her and my mom had some, you know, issues. But I mean, now that I've had children of my own, I look back and honestly, you know, I had the same kind of situation with one of my sons. He would run away too, and you know, which kind of gave me flashbacks of when my sister went missing. So
sure.
So yeah, I've always raising my children. I've always been very overprotective too, but not too much to where they wanted to rebel. But yeah, I wasn't home, so I didn't know what triggered my sister to run away. But it was scary then, though. I mean, it's still scary. It's scary.
Sure, of course it is. Of course it is. Did you ever see any of this firsthand before you moved out? Did you ever see any of these things going on?
No. Okay. I mean, Jennifer would get a little, you know, I think she had a little bit of anger issues.
Okay.
Yeah, she was a little wild one, but nothing bad, you know, nothing serious, you know. I don't know. That's just how I saw it.
Okay.
From, you know, being there. So, but I mean, she never really ran away when I was home.
Right. No, when she would get, like, as we've already talked about, it seems like it was pretty, once again, just 3 or 4 times in the, you know, before she went missing in end of July of 1993. You know, 3 or 4 times, but I'm sure you saw her a lot. You know, you didn't just see her when she would walk over there after having an argument with Sue. I'm guessing you saw her a lot more than that.
Yeah.
You know, getting together. So, okay. What do you know about her being sent to this ranch? When did that happen? What do you know about it? Do you remember how it was arranged? Or were you involved in that at all? I realized you had some of your own things going on at the time, but what did you know about that?
All I know was Jennifer had been at my house. She had come to my house, and my mom. Well, I got a knock on the door. It was from the police department, and they said that they were taking her to the Sheriff's Youth Ranch. That's all I knew. That's it. I didn't know anything else. And my mom, I feel, my mom chose that because she felt Jennifer would be safer and maybe get the counseling that she needed. You know, and it seemed to have worked, you know, because when she did get out of the Sheriff's Youth Ranch, it was like her whole mindset had changed. So with her disappearing the way she did, it just totally didn't make sense to none of us, honestly, because she was a totally different Jennifer when she came out of the youth ranch.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, just maybe some general details about this ranch. Where is it, and how long do you think she was there? Once again, I realized that you were not her parent. You were had your own things going on. But what do you remember about those general details?
I know it was in Florida. I want to say it was, I don't know if it was Isla Mirada or a little bit up north more. I don't even remember where the Sheriff's Youth Ranch was. I'm so sorry, I don't remember that.
Okay.
I knew that when she was there, she was getting counseling. She was doing well in school, which Jennifer always really did really well in school. She was a straight A student. She was, she was seeing doctors for her eyes, and she was getting her teeth, taken care of and everything like that, which they supposedly don't have any documents of that, but she did. I mean, she was getting, she was good there. She was safe there, and she was doing very well. And like I said, when she got out, her and my mom's relationship was, it seemed to me, stronger than ever, so, yeah.
Okay, so this is a ranch run by the state or the local, for children who with behavior problems or something like that, and the state of Florida here tries to give them the counseling that they need. Maybe they're not getting it, locally.
Right.
Something like that. Okay.
I'm assuming, yeah.
Okay, and how long do you remember she was there? Was it a month? Was it 3 months? 6 months?
Oh gosh, I want to say maybe 6 months or more.
All right, so fairly long.
Yeah,
fairly long.
She was there for a little bit.
Okay, and we have to remember he hasn't come. I don't know how much he's going to be a part of this discussion, but you have a brother as well, and he is younger. He's the youngest child. He's younger than Jennifer. He was 9 years old at the time of her disappearance, and he lived at home with Jennifer and your mother, Sue.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So she gets sent to this ranch, and then she comes back, and any memory of how long she was home before she went missing, as you stated, there seemed to be a change in her. That time away and whatever was done there seemed to help her. Was she home a month, 3 months? Any idea?
I don't. It's been so far. Long ago. I don't remember. I know it wasn't too long after, to be honest with you, because I know that she had gone out and my mom had told her, hey, one of your friends from, I want to say Miami, was in town, because he only lived like right down the road. And that's why Jennifer wanted to go down and see him, and my mom allowed it, and gave her a curfew and everything like that. So
okay, so it's very possible that she came back from this ranch, came back home just that summer.
Yeah.
And it could be that just a month later or even a month and a half later, she went missing. Very possible.
I can't really, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I wasn't actually living with them when this
happened.
So it was, and I was all wrapped up with, I was Destiny. I had my daughter when, like months after Jennifer went missing. So
right, I completely understand. All I'm establishing is that really that's a very close time frame there. And I don't know how much this has to do with her disappearance or not, but we just have to understand that she was gone away for several months at this ranch. She comes back, and then just not long. It could be 3 weeks. It could be a month and a half. It's still not that long. That then she went missing.
Maybe 3 months, 2-3 months after. I want to say, because the person that she wanted to go see, he didn't come in town often. He would come down and visit his dad.
Okay.
Every so often. So. Yeah.
Okay. So overall, your impression, once again, you've just talked about why you had you're living on your own, you had your own things going on. But your impression was that after she came back from this, she and your mother were getting along better.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's move up to, and we have to understand that you were not there, but and I will be talking about what Sue, your mother, Jennifer's mother, told me about this evening. But what is your understanding about what happened between or what happened that evening to cause Jennifer to walk off on July 30th, 1993? What's your understanding?
Okay, so what I was told, was that, my mom had gone down and told Jennifer that it was her time to come in, her curfew was up, and, I guess Jennifer had asked, can I get like 10, 15 more minutes? My mom agreed, but, she wanted her home in those 10, 15 minutes. After those 10, 15 minutes, she didn't return. My mom went down to remind her, hey, Jennifer, it's time to come in, and I guess her and my sister said a few words to my mom, and then she took off.
She walked off.
Yeah.
Okay.
She said she wasn't coming back or something along those lines. I don't know exactly.
Okay, so what you're referring to is something you said a couple minutes ago. That Jennifer was down talking to this boy who was from the mainland, I guess you'd say, of Florida. He was down there with his parents. She knew this boy from previous summers or something.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
and so they were just hanging out outside, and just down the block. And it's getting dark. And of course, in July, it's gonna not get dark till 9 o'clock or something like that. But
I think my mom had given her curfew like 9 or 10. I couldn't remember.
Okay, and so she goes down there to try to get Jennifer to come home. Jennifer's hanging out. She says she'll be home, and when she doesn't, Sue goes down there again. They get into maybe a very short argument, and Jennifer walks off.
Yes.
All right. And my understanding in talking to Sue is she thought, well, this is like those other times that she thought that
she
Jennifer
was walk to my house.
was going to walk to your house. Why? Because this had happened before. Totally logical thinking. I do have to ask, is it your understanding that your brother, who was 9 at the time, was a witness to this? The listeners should know that I've spoken to him once, but I've not spoken to him since. But, was he a witness? Was he walking down there with your mother, or was he hanging at home? Do you even know?
I think so. I don't even know for sure, honestly. I wasn't there, so I don't know. I'm only going by what I was told.
Yeah.
So I don't know for sure.
Okay. So she walks off, and your mother thinks that she's going to your house. Do you remember anything specifically about your day, that day, separate from her being over there? Do you remember anything? For example, when Sue got back to her house after Jennifer stopped off or walked off, did she call you to say, "Hey, I think Jennifer's headed your way"? Anything like that?
No, because cell phones weren't a really big thing back then. So my mom would drive over to my house.
Okay.
And she asked me, "Is Jennifer here?" And I was like, "No." She told me Jennifer walked off. So we helped. I got in the car with my mom, and we drove around trying to find her. Went to some of her friends' house and everything, tried to find her, couldn't find her. So, but I didn't know until the next day because my mom thought that maybe she was just, I know my mom was out looking for her that night because she couldn't, how does she just disappear, just gone, just, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It makes no sense. So my mom was just driving around, driving the neighborhood, trying to see if she could catch a glimpse of her.
Okay.
And my mom came over the next day, and she was just probably thinking that Jennifer might have been at my place, and she wasn't. And then that's when we kind of took the day and just drove around and everything like that.
So you didn't find out until the next day, and the way you found out Jennifer was missing is your mom shows up, and she's expecting Jennifer to be there, and Jennifer's not there.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So the night before she goes stomping off, and your mother thinks, well, I'm going to try to track her down. She isn't able to track her down, but she never does end up at your house that night. Not until the next day, which once again kind of seems like what had happened before. At that time, of course, I realized that your family, you, your brother, your mother, worried, very, very worried.
Yeah.
Especially considering that, how it usually went, and it was different this time. Any particular idea that jumped into your mind? Were you even thinking about that at the time? Did you think maybe somebody did pick her up, or could she have gone to somebody's house? Maybe she backtracked to this boy's house where he was staying with his parents. Anything that you remember 29 years later?
The only thing that I could think of at the time was, her friend's house, and she had a lot of friends at there's an apartment complex behind the Kmart over there, so that was the first place we hit. We was asking everybody there, and they hadn't seen her, and we went to the Rock, which was another subdivision. They called it the Rock, where she knew a lot of people there, and they hadn't seen her, and we just checked everywhere. I mean, I didn't think anything out of the order. I mean, it's a small little town. You don't expect something like this to happen. You just don't.
Of course you don't. And maybe I should ask you about that. Being that you moved there when you were 13, so you were there for about 4 years before this happened.
Yeah.
Would you say that you got a safe feeling living in Marathon, Florida? What would you say?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I did. I mean, it was so like everybody knew each other. You know, everybody knew we all went to school together. You know, and we had some of the kids from Big Pine that went to school with us, and so yeah, everybody just knew each other. So I felt safe. I mean, I'm an itty bitty. I'm only 5'2", and at the time only 98 pounds, and I felt safe to walk down the road at, you know. Yeah, I walked everywhere. I was not afraid of walking around. So yeah.
Okay. Would you say this area, of course, I think a lot of people, at least in the United States, who know the Keys, maybe people in other countries who listen to this program don't even know what Key West and that part of Florida is, but for people in the United States, I think they do. Is this part of the area that you would call a touristy area of the Keys, or is it more established people who just really live there?
Yeah, it was more established people that lived there. The touristy part would be like down towards Key West and stuff like that. But where we lived at in Marathon, it was more like locals. They lived there. They were established there. They had been there for years, you know. So there was a few that would, you know, travel back and forth. It was their vacation home, but for the most part, they were all established.
Okay. When did you, or your mother, I suppose your mother, get the police involved? And this would be the Monroe County Sheriff's Office. How soon were they involved in trying to figure out what happened to Jennifer?
Well, in my opinion, I don't really think they were involved much. But I know my mom got them involved, like, immediately, from what I understand. They had to, because I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Jennifer was like on a grace period. You know what I mean?
Oh, so, from the ranch? She had to behave herself?
Yeah.
Okay. And so the missing persons report was filed with Monroe County by the police?
Yes, by my mom. I'm sure it was pretty immediately. My mom, yeah.
Okay. So, and we're going to talk about this FOIA that, of course, a lot of listeners already know about it, although they might not have known it was connected to Jennifer's case. But when when I got it, and of course passed it on to you and your mother last year, we found out they did quite a bit. But we'll get to that. But at the time, the way you were viewing it, it didn't seem like they were doing a lot.
No, they didn't. There was no, like, Amber Alert or no, like, there wasn't anything like, oh yeah, we'll look into it, you know. But I don't feel like they really did anything. Honestly, I really don't.
This is and the reason I think this disappearance is somewhat unique in Unfound covering it is because you essentially live on an island. And if you want to walk away, there's only one way to walk out, and that's on Route 1. In contrast to your average American town, there's like 20 ways. If, man or woman, boy or girl, whoever wants to leave, there's many different ways they could go, and there's usually woods and everything. And this is just an island, and you're surrounded by water. With one highway that you'd think if she was walking on that highway to like get out of town, that somebody would have seen her. You know, a 13-year-old walking on the road, I think, would stick out. Okay, so in addition, there's not that many people there. You know, between where your mother lived and where you lived, there's not that many houses. As you said, it's a mile. I think Maryland, Florida.
Well, there was a lot of residentials. I mean, there was a trailer park that she would have had to walk past. There were businesses that she would have had to walk past. There were houses that she would have had to walk past. I mean, people had to have seen if she walked past that. You know what I mean? Because there were like side streets that she could have like dipped and went through. But for the main part, I mean, she's just gonna walk straight from my mom's to my house and on that road. Then yeah, I'm sure she was seen for sure.
The work that you and your mother did, of course, you filed this missing persons report, but I know that you and your mother continued to work on this, and of course, mainly her. Once again, we had your own things going on. But did any of her friends, anybody who knew Jennifer well, the way you remember it now, have any ideas, anything at all that they could, any suspicions, theories at all?
No, and they were actually none of her friends just didn't hear from her. They didn't know anything, and I mean, to this day, there's a couple of them that I still stay in contact with. That they still like, I still haven't figured out. Asking me questions if I've heard from my sister or anything like that, and like they're baffled just as much as we are.
Okay. So, being that we've brought up Monroe County, they are still to this day responsible for her disappearance. That's where I got the Freedom of Information Act paperwork from. It was 600 some pages. But I think this is important. Let's talk about this interaction that you had with a Deputy Watson at some point with Jennifer. You were actually a party to this. This was, I think, well before she went missing. But why don't you tell us about this encounter?
It was an incident where he had told both my sister and I that if we ever wanted to disappear or not be found, he would help us.
He said that.
He said that.
I think we're going to need a little more context to this. How did you run into him? Where were you and Jennifer? How did this even come up? Did you ever have any interactions with him before? Maybe you can tell a little bit more about that.
Yeah, it was one of the times that I had run away prior to moving out. That I ran away.
Okay.
It wasn't nothing bad. I was just being a typical 16-year-old trying to spread her wings, I wanted to be able to do things, and Mom, like I said, being overprotective, was kind of like, no, it's not a good idea. So I went anyway, and of course she, filed for a missing persons on me, and we ran into David, and David is the one who found me, but Jennifer was with me. Mm-hmm. And he had turned around and he's like, he's like, if you ever want to just, if you want to disappear, just let us know. We'll help you, to where you can't be found. And I looked at Jennifer, and Jennifer looked at me, and I was just like, that's something odd to say for a police officer to say to us. Mm-hmm. It was awkward. It was weird. I didn't know how to even respond to that, honestly. Mm-hmm.
So he was like in the process of bringing you home or something like that, or?
Honestly, no. He found me, but he didn't bring me home.
Okay, so he was looking for you because this is something you ran away, and when you were found, that's when he said to you, and Jennifer was there as well.
Yeah.
Okay. I believe your mother told you about this, or maybe Sue even heard that herself.
I'm not sure if she had heard it or not. I don't think so. She wasn't anywhere near us when he said it. Yeah, right. She didn't even know where I was, Mm-hmm.
All right, so we have a person in a law enforcement capacity. You've just been found after having an argument or having you were just wanted a little more freedom. Just like it sounded like Jennifer did. Maybe this is something between the both of you. And this is what he said to you.
Yes.
Okay. All right. And after that, I know you wouldn't know for Jennifer, but for yourself, did you ever have any contact with Deputy Watson after that?
After that?
Yeah.
I can't remember. I don't think so.
Okay.
There was that one incident I told you about, but that was before.
Why don't you go through that one as well?
We had, I think I told you where my sister and I had gone to his house for some reason or another. I couldn't remember. Mm-hmm. Like I said, everybody knew everybody. Yeah. And when we got there, he opened the door in his underwear. And me and Jennifer took off.
Wow.
Yeah. And I told my mom about it. And my mom, freaked out about it, confronted him about it. He denied it, of course.
Yeah.
But yeah, that incident.
All right, so there was this underwear incident and him saying that to you about if you ever want to run away.
Yeah.
All right. Wow, okay. And we'll come back to Watson here in a little bit. Now, the looking through the paperwork, and we're going to talk about the paperwork in a little more detail later, but the person who was responsible for, I guess you want to call him an investigator, but they don't have a missing persons unit, of course, in the Monroe County Sheriff's Office or anything, as most police departments don't. But he was the one who did most of the main paperwork at the beginning back in 1993 and the next few years. What do you remember about him?
Oh, are we talking about Detective Lawson?
We are, yes, please.
Okay. I really didn't much like him at all. I had heard of him hosting parties for underage kids. I just didn't like him. I always got this really bad, vibe about him. So I really didn't get much interaction with him. So.
Had you ever? So you're saying you had heard of him before Jennifer went missing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in regards to these parties or whatever that he was holding at his house, you had heard about this from your friends, or how did you know about it?
Well, I had heard about it from, I just want to call her an acquaintance because I really wasn't really much of a friend of hers. Or, vice versa. But she had told me about the parties because she would go to them.
Okay. All right. And this is the guy who then became responsible for the investigation into Jennifer's disappearance.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. All right. So we have these two guys, and I'll just speak to both of them right now, being that you've talked about your interaction with them. Maybe I should ask you this first. After Jennifer went missing, did you have much interaction with Investigator Lawson, Deputy Lawson at all?
No.
None.
No. Nope.
Zero.
Yep. And that's what's so funny is because, if Lawson's a detective on the case, why didn't he, wouldn't he want to investigate or talk with the sister or any family members that might be able to help him find, and he never came to the house or talked to me or anything.
Okay. Do you even know how much he went, once again, we're going to get to the FOIA, maybe he did more than you knew at the time, we're going to talk about that, but going door to door, talking to people, you didn't know anything about that, I don't think Sue heard anything about that as well.
Nope. I didn't hear about any of that.
Okay.
The flyers that were put up was because of my mother. My mother had them printed out, and we posted them.
Yeah. Okay. Now, the listeners should know, and you can just relax here for a few minutes, Angela. I did, in hearing about these things, going back to when we first started talking last summer, I looked these two guys up, and for Detective Lawson, who was the person responsible, at least originally, he's not had a very good life since 1993. He eventually had several run-ins with the law himself, and this is public record. I don't think I'm saying anything private because I was easily able to obtain this information on the internet, that it seems that he has had a drinking problem for a long time. And as Angela also knows, and Sue also knows, I had a chance, although this guy is off the record, does not want his name mentioned or anything else, but I had a chance to talk to somebody in the Monroe County Sheriff's Office, that's all I'm going to say, who knew Lawson, and he did not have a very high opinion of him at all. All right, so a fellow law enforcement officer did not think very highly of him. Not at all. I'll just say that. So for Deputy Watson, and going back to this is the guy who answered the door in his underwear, who said, if you ever want to disappear, just come find me. That's what he said to both you and Jennifer. Maybe a year before Jennifer went missing, Deputy Watson ended up becoming a drug dealer. And he had drug charges, trafficking drugs, not in Florida, but he had moved to another state and got in trouble there. And even by the time that, if you can believe this, by the time that Jennifer went missing in 1993, I think he was on his fourth marriage. And he wasn't that old of a guy. But unfortunately, though, Deputy Watson is now deceased. And he's been dead for some years. So any chance to talk to him is long gone about any of this. But we have two deputies in this department who seem to have issues. One became a drug dealer and spent some time in jail for it. The other one had some drinking issues. I feel very, very bad for that, but I think that we have to think about that. And something else in researching people in the Marathon, Florida area, it should be known that there was also, and this is also public record, so it's a factual, so I can talk about it. There was a deputy Batson, so there was Watson, W-A-T-S-O-N, but there was also a deputy Batson, B-A-T-S-O-N. And what I discovered regarding him, and it really was just completely by accident that I discovered this, he later in the 90s was moved to another police department in Florida, and I think it was Tallahassee. And he eventually was fired from that job there because of having inappropriate communications with underage children.
Yeah, and I believe, I don't mean to interrupt, but I
Please.
believe Batson was the one that lived on the middle school property when we were all attending school there. So, I mean, who's to say he, Jennifer ran into him? I don't know.
Well, we're not going to theorize too much, but we just have to understand that there were people in positions of authority who could be responsible for finding Jennifer, and just doing this research over 25 years later, I was able to discover at least 3 of them had, not 3 very good guys.
Yeah.
Every other person who worked in the sheriff's office might have been completely perfect. But unfortunately, you have 2 guys who are kind of associated with Jennifer's disappearance, in that one knew her, saying those things to her that, Angela, you've already talked about, and the other one who's actually an investigator. Not very good guys, problems. And then just by accident running into another one who maybe 5 years later had a charge against them to the point of being fired, that you could connect maybe with children going missing. When you hear about adults having, whether they're in law enforcement or not, having inappropriate communication with children. And all of this information will be posted coming up to the point of this episode coming out. So all of you can see it. Once again, it is all public information. All right, so we have all of that. I have to ask you this. We do not theorize on this program, but I'm just going to, ask you a yes or no question. At the time, did you ever get the feeling that law enforcement believed that your mother caused Jennifer's disappearance?
Yes, they tried to blame her. Yeah.
Okay. All right. However, on the other hand, in speaking to your mother in the days, weeks, months, and even years after Jennifer went missing, did you and your mother ever get the idea that maybe somebody in law enforcement could have been responsible for Jennifer's disappearance?
Both, yes. Well, my mother and I, yes, we did believe that somebody in law enforcement was involved.
Right. And that will come up in the FOIA information because of things that your mother told investigators years later. Okay. And everyone should know, once again, I was able to contact, and I appreciate this guy talking to me. I hope to talk to him again before this episode comes out. But as far as he knows, but he was not responsible for Jennifer's disappearance at the time that she went missing in 1993. He's told me that at no time, to his knowledge, was Sue Perry, Jennifer's mother, ever a suspect. That's what he
Well,
said.
they
And then,
met. I know, but they made her like
yeah,
whoever was on the case. They made her feel like she was. I
right.
mean, DCF or whatever it is down there. They interrogated her. They tried to make her look like a bad mother. They went to school and harassed my brother. You know, to the point where they even took him out during his lunchtime and had to skip his lunch just so that they could question him and stuff like that, which is totally wrong. Why do that? My brother was already traumatized because he has a sister.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
I get it. I get it. The issue, though, is just as in 1993 as it is now in 2022, when children go missing, usually the parents are responsible. A high percentage of the time, it's disgusting. Of course, it's horrible, but that continues to be the facts, and I think that was the fact even well before 1993, maybe even going back to the beginning of time. So that is something that has to be considered. But if anybody, the listeners, are listening to this, I actually asked this person who would be in a position to know. And he said that Sue Perry officially was not considered to be, at no time was considered to be a suspect in Jennifer's disappearance. All right, so now brings us to this. You living there, you do not live there anymore, but had you ever heard before or since of any other children going missing in the Marathon or just the whole Key West area at all?
No, none. Nope.
Okay. Any, you moving there when you were 13, and had you ever heard of any kids being abducted and then being found? Any children, your friends, have any stories about walking along the road and some stranger trying to lure them into their car? Any stories like that you remember from back at the time in the early 90s?
Nope. No.
Zero.
None.
Okay.
Yeah.
I submitted the paperwork. As the listeners know, I don't usually get into too much FOIA work because you never know what you're going to get. Usually you have to wait a long time. But when I found out about Jennifer's disappearance, and I had the idea that maybe this wasn't going to be a disappearance I was going to cover right at that second. I thought we had some time, and of course it's been some time. It's been 6 months. I decided to submit the paperwork needed to the Monroe County Sheriff's Office, and I had made the decision, maybe you don't know this, Angela, but if they had told me it was only like 30 pages or something, I don't know how much, we would really get out of that.
Right.
But as the listeners now know, and you know, because I sent it to you, as I sent it to your mother as well, it ended up being 600 some pages. And what was your impression when you found out that Jennifer's file with the Monroe County Sheriff's Office was over 600 pages? How surprised with you, astounded, before you even looked at it, what was your response?
Like, wow, like I was like, why is it so many pages, and how come we've not really, if it's that many pages, then we would have been included in some of them, the discussions, or, you know what I mean, but we weren't really. How did they come up with all these pages, and why weren't we notified with, some of the things that they supposedly might have found? Or I was really shocked. I was like, wow, why is it so big? That's a large file. That's wow. Yeah. So
did it fly in the face, I guess, of your impression that they were not doing anything at the time? I have to ask.
You kind of, yeah.
Okay.
But the thing was, like I said, there was no news media, there was no newspaper article, there was nothing. So I don't even know. Like I didn't even know what I was getting into when I started reading the files.
Yeah. Okay. So that was your impression when you found out it was 600 some pages, and they sent it to me, and I want to thank the Monroe County Sheriff's Office. Or the Monroe County administration, whatever you want to call it. They got back to me within the same day, and they sent me that information in a couple weeks. Now, some of it is redacted, but not very much. Not very much. And
I think maybe 25 pages, was it?
yeah, and some of them are duplicates, but still, there's probably 400 some pages of unique material there. So that was your impression before you even read it, but just in general, we're going to get into some specifics. But after reading the whole thing or looking through it, I'm not saying you read every word, but looking through it, what was your impression?
After reading everything, honestly, I feel some people knew something and didn't say anything.
Okay. On that note, speaking to that, let's just go through, and I am going to make the FOIA available to everyone so they can see it for themselves. Because it's ours now, right?
Yeah.
Being that, and it should be known that we paid for it, so they willingly gave it up. And once you give it up, something like that, we can make it public. And I guess Monroe County doesn't mind. Let's talk about Austin. Had you ever heard him being mentioned? Who is he? Because his name is mentioned prominently in this FOIA, somebody that they had talked to.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know why. Honestly, Austin was just somebody that was an acquaintance of my mother's. We knew him. I mean, we weren't very personable with him. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? But and Jennifer didn't hang out with him. He was an older man, and just so I don't understand why Austin was even in there. I'm feeling because of the girlfriend, because Jennifer did know the girlfriend.
Natalie?
Yes, Natalie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you think it could be, because he is mentioned prominently, the listeners will get to see that, could it be because Austin had a criminal record at the time and continued to have one after? Do you think that
I honestly didn't even know he had a criminal record, because, again, we didn't really hang out with him or associate with him, so I didn't even know he had a criminal record till just now, till you just told me. So.
Okay, so he does. He does, okay. And I'm sorry I did look that up. If I didn't send it to you, I will surely do that. An extensive criminal record. Nothing involving children or anything, but the listeners will be able to judge that for themselves. But he came up. Is it your impression, I'm not here to put words in your mouth, but was it your impression in reading the FOIA that he was being questioned because of some rumors that were running around Marathon about Jennifer being seen with him? Is that your impression, or what do you think?
I don't even know. I didn't even know that Jennifer was seen with him. Okay. I mean, if that was in the FOIA, I probably didn't get to that part, because it was just so overwhelming to read everything. Mm-hmm. Not to put it on the back burner, but I do have work and a son.
I got you, and it's 600 some pages, right?
Yeah.
All right, so Austin is mentioned prominently. Natalie is also mentioned, and they did end up getting married at some point, although I don't know if they're married now. But Austin is a lot older than Natalie. Natalie would have been maybe just a few years older than you at the time.
Yeah, I think she was in her I think she was in her early 20, or maybe even like 19, 20.
Yeah,
she was young.
That's what I think too. And Austin was well into his 30s or 40s or 40s.
Yeah.
Okay, and
I think they ended up.
And for those of you who maybe aren't going to be able to get to read the FOIA for whatever reason, the police investigators at the time, Lawson and maybe others, were following a lead. A rumor that Jennifer had been seen with Austin after the disappearance date of July 30th. But it doesn't seem like that ever panned out to be anything.
Right.
Let's move on to these people. We're not, we know Austin's last name, Nata's last name, but we're not mentioning last names. But same question regarding Michelle. Did you know her? Because she was somebody who Lawson, Investigator Lawson, Deputy Lawson, seemed to really concentrate on in the weeks after going, talking to her multiple times. Did you know her?
I knew of her.
Okay, you knew of her, and what would you say about her?
I honestly don't have anything really to base an opinion on her. I didn't really know her, so I mean, her name had come up a couple of times, but if I've ever met her, I don't remember.
Okay.
I was a very quiet kid. I pretty much stayed to myself. So
That's fine. I'm just asking. So, once again, at the time in 1993, even though you might have heard of her, you never heard of her being connected to Jennifer's disappearance. You never even knew that she was being questioned.
No, I didn't know. I didn't know this. Yeah, I did not know that Michelle was being questioned or anything.
Okay. How about Shannon?
Yes, I believe Shannon knows some things that. Yeah, we'll just stop there. But yeah.
Okay. So you knew Shannon?
Yeah.
Okay. Would you say had you known about her before Jennifer went missing?
Yes.
Okay. How was that you knew her? Just because it's a small town, or did you have any personal interaction with her?
I did. When I was younger, I met her when we had just moved down to Marathon. Honestly, she was our neighbor. She was dating one of our neighbors. And at the time, she seemed pretty chill. You know, I was like maybe 13, 14 when I met her. We'd hang out, like, you know, right there at the house, you know, and she seemed okay. She didn't seem, but that was when she was younger. And then as she got older, I didn't hang out with her.
Okay. Was she a little bit of trouble?
Yes. Okay. Yes, she was.
Okay. And when people do get to look at the FOIA, and I will make sure this FOIA is available as much as I can, but once again, it's 600 some pages. It will certainly be posted on Facebook. It'll be on the website, you know, as a downloadable file. So people can see what the police had to say back at the time in 1993 and onwards. And you also see a lot of paperwork that gets into the 21st century, police following leads of Jennifer being seen in, you know, possibly in other states, and what the police did to try to figure out if that was really Jennifer or not. What about Derek and Lamont? Do you know anything about these guys? Did Jennifer know them?
Jennifer knew them. I did not.
And how do you know, or how did she know them?
I believe through school and through friends that lived in the apartment complex behind Kmart.
Okay. Did you ever meet them personally? Did you have any personal opinion of them?
No, I never met them personally.
Okay. At the time in 1993, did you or your mother ever suspect that they could have had anything to do with Jennifer's disappearance? Did that ever go through your mind?
Not me, personally, not me. I mean, I don't know about my mom, but I know not me because I didn't barely knew them. I just, you know.
Okay. All right, so those are some of the prominent names in the FOIA. These were people who were questioned. Their names came up in rumors that the police were following, people giving them bits of information, tips. But I think in our missing persons experience, we know how many of these tips never go anywhere. But just to point one thing out in particular, and this was the whole thing between Michelle and Shannon, and, you know, they didn't, it seems to me they were like I guess in a 21st century term, we would call them frenemies. And you know, Natalie might have been involved in this as well, is it seemed that Lawson had gone to one of the houses more than once under the story that Jennifer was hiding in one of these women's places. And that he would show up and this person would allow him to go through looking for any signs Jennifer was there. He never found any signs that Jennifer was there, but that story kept popping up, that she was there. And it's hard to determine whether this was kind of a Mean Girls thing, one just trying to get the other in trouble, or, you know, if there was something actually truthful to this. And, you know, not that this was like years after a disappearance, or maybe not even weeks, but certainly maybe in the week or 2 weeks after Jennifer went missing, that this was something that he was following, but never could find any proof that Jennifer had ever been at this house. But you did not know, and your mother, for all you know, did not know any of this was going on in 1993.
I didn't. I did not know.
I don't think your mother did
I can't speak.
I think
my mother's never said anything about it, so I'm just going to say that it's safe to assume that she didn't know either. But
yeah.
I know I didn't know.
Yeah. So they were keeping, I think, a tight lid on this for whatever reason. It very well may be they just didn't tell you or your mother, or but your brother's only 9 years old.
Yeah.
But maybe just because they didn't want to get your hopes up, and maybe they felt it was something they need to follow up on, but they thought the odds of it being true were very, very low. So that could be the reason. And when nothing, popped up, then they're like, well, we really don't have to tell the family about it. It ended up being nothing, just some vicious rumor that might just, upset you more. So
Right.
that happens. So I don't
Yeah.
necessarily say there's anything suspicious about it. The problem we have is that the person doing this investigation ended up losing his job because of his own personal issues, and we had other people who could have been involved, Batson, Watson, who might have said, hey, while out in patrol, be looking for Jennifer Perry while you're riding around. But these guys weren't the greatest people either.
Yep, they probably could have seen her and just not said anything.
It's possible. So,
Yeah.
So we'll just leave it at that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's move on to this. And this is another deputy, and this is another person. We're not going to use his name, but everybody should know he is now deceased. He just died within the last couple years. What do you know about a statement, and did your mother tell you about this when it happened, that a deputy said to your mother, if you want to know what happened, investigate the sheriff's office? Did you know about this comment?
Yes. My mom told me immediately when she found out.
Let's talk. I realize you were not a party to this, and I will do my best afterwards to kind of maybe fill in a few of the blanks. But when did this happen? When did she tell you that this happened? And what did you think about it, etc.?
I honestly cannot remember how long after Jennifer disappeared when she was told this, but I do remember my mom coming to me and telling me, that this is what she was told, and it actually kind of shocked me a little bit. I'm like, well, what are we going to do about this, with this information? If he's telling us that we should do this, what are we going to do about it? But my mom was afraid that nobody would believe her or listen to her, so... Yeah.
Right, and what your mother told me is that when these stories, of course, she knew about the story about what Watson said to you and Jennifer the year before. She knew, of course, about you going to his house and him being in his underwear, answering in his underwear, even though it was too, it's not appropriate to answer the door for anybody. But it seems even more, even more inappropriate if it's two girls at the door. Because everybody checks to see who's outside before you open the door. We have Deputy Lawson, who had his own personal issues. We have this Batson. And your mother, passed on to me. She really didn't know who she could trust.
Yeah, she didn't. She really didn't.
She talked about that. And then on top of this was even before this guy said this to her. And then this was said to her. But... unfortunately, that still 29 years later has not gone anywhere.
Yeah. And what I don't understand either is if this person, who said this to my mother, if he knew that possibly that the police department had something to do with it, why didn't he do something about it?
And that's the flip side of this. And I'm glad you brought that up, Angela, because I think that's a very enlightened view. That we always have to be... We like whistleblowers... Okay, but we get suspicious of whistleblowers who obviously continued to work somewhere after complaining about their own company or a law enforcement agency or anything. Right. They complained, they said they were doing all these illegal things, but the person continued to work there anyway.
Yeah.
It damages their credibility. I'm not saying this guy was lying, but it causes us to, question it and really... not, jump to any conclusions. For all we know, this guy might have been wanting to get somebody's job and was hoping he'd get somebody else fired. He'd get a promotion by getting somebody else in trouble, for all we know. But your mother did tell you about this, and your mother and I did talk about that. Let's move, but we're not going to use his name, and like I said, he is deceased, just like former Deputy Watson is, as is Deputy Batson, by the way. This courtroom sighting, did you know about it at the time? Did your mother know about, tell you about it? What do you know about it?
I was actually told by somebody, I can't remember who it was that had told me, but they had seen like somebody that looked like Jennifer sitting between a gentleman and a woman, and they were both described as, if I can say it, Watson and his fiance at the time. They weren't married yet.
Mm-hmm.
And they were sitting in the courtroom. And Jennifer was described as being slouched over, which Jennifer did. She slouched. And she was just sitting there in the courtroom. So I don't know what they were doing there, if it's been, if that was investigated or anything of that nature. So, no.
This is another topic that is in that extensive FOIA. I cannot tell you what page it's on, but it's in there. And there were some comments made by, was it Lawson or one of the other people who might have been helping him with this investigation, that they tried to look into this, and the source of this story is in there, and in the end, it seemed that the sheriff's office dismissed the sighting. But it is noteworthy that whoever came forward about this, and once again, I think that person's name is in this FOIA, but I think she is deceased now too, brought this forward, and they looked into it, and yes, this person, the guy allegedly looked like Deputy Watson. This is the guy that we now know said that to you and Jennifer about wanting to disappear, and he was allegedly with one of his wives, and in fact, what your mother told me is he actually saw her somewhere and actually went out of his way to say that he was going to be moving. He was getting married and he was going to be moving.
Yep.
He said that. It seemed so weird to her because she didn't know him at all.
Yeah. He told my mom, I believe he said that he was moving towards South Carolina.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And I don't think know if it was South Carolina where he got in trouble. I think it was North Carolina, but he got in some trouble after he got out of there. And it's
I don't know if my mom had told you this, but a few years after Jennifer went missing, my mom was always on the computer trying to find leads for my sister. Always, even years later, she, and it showed up on, I want to say, I don't know if it was the Charlie Project or the missing persons, but it showed that Jennifer had been missing in South Carolina, which kind of like threw my mom off.
Yeah.
My mom ended up contacting the agency and like, what do you mean? She's been missing from Marathon, Florida, not South Carolina. How is she missing from South Carolina?
And
then they removed it.
Yeah, I think where the confusion might have been, it might be explained in that FOIA. Given that the Monroe County Sheriff's Office eventually, now this was after Lawson was gone, this was after Batson was gone, this was after all these people that we've talked about were all gone for one reason or another, that the Sheriff's Office did an extensive investigation into a young woman who could have been her. That's I think what it was. And it turned out that this woman could vouch for her prior history going back several years, well before Jennifer went missing. But there were a lot of communications back and forth that's in the paperwork trying to figure out, could this be that Jennifer ran away and changed her identity, or maybe kept her same name or slightly changed her name and then was in South Carolina, and coincidentally where Detective Watson went. The issue, though, is I think Watson actually ended up going to North Carolina, not South Carolina. And I think from what I've found, maybe his plan was to go to South Carolina and they just kept going until they got to North Carolina. I don't know.
Right.
So there's that. I think something else that we want to talk about the FOIA, and this came out later, that I don't think we want to reveal where your mother lives now. She doesn't live in Marathon, Florida anymore, but much more recently, within the last, I think it was 12 years, 15 years, she had been interviewed by police in that particular state. And I think they were doing the Monroe County Sheriff's Office a favor by going to talk to your mother about Jennifer's disappearance, because Monroe County didn't want to send somebody the whole way to where she lives now, I guess out of their pocket, flying somebody out there. But your mother reiterated, just, not in 1993, but I think that this conversation was like in 2010 or something like that, that's in the FOIA information, that she talked about Monroe County Sheriff's deputies being involved in Jennifer's disappearance. She told them that. And that is in the FOIA as well. And I think the reason I'm bringing it up is because I think it's, even though this, of course, a statement like that would not make the Monroe County Sheriff's Office, being shown in a very positive light. I mean, it doesn't get more negative than that.
Yeah.
But it is included in the FOIA. It's not like they scrubbed it or dismissed it or anything else. It's right in there with all the other information for anybody to see if they want to foul and get it and everything. So I think that that's good on them, that even though they're kind of getting trashed in the FOIA, that they include it in the information anyway. So there's that. Okay. So once again, being that we just talked about this FOIA, and everybody, if you have the time, all 600 some pages to go through it, I think you should. It's probably one of the most extensive FOIAs you're ever going to get to read. But I think we do need to talk about something else. And that is maybe one of the negative aspects of the FOIA. It does talk about your mother and these allegations against her. If you could, of course, I'd love to interview Sue, but once again, she's been having some health issues and did not think she was up to this interview, which I understand. But, some of the parts in that FOIA, bring up some past things. I'd like to give you a chance to defend your mother regarding those things.
Okay.
Given that, in there, it was alleged that, child abuse and things like that. Can you talk about that? Because of course she says they're untrue. I'm perfectly willing to believe that, but being that we're doing this interview, you are her daughter. What can you say about that?
There was no child abuse. She was investigated and proven that there was none. It was just, she was a single mom doing the best she could, and she did a great job, I think. She was just overprotective of us kids, which she had a bit of an upbringing. So I think that had a part to do with her, raising, especially us girls. She made sure that, she was very overprotective, for sure.
And we should know, for the record, despite this being looked into, and it's in the FOIA, part of the information, that, of course, she never was charged anything, never had to go to jail. The reason that Jennifer went to this ranch was not because of anything Sue did.
Right.
That was something that somebody decided that might be good for Jennifer, and it sounds like it might have been good for Jennifer. But it was nothing because they were taking Jennifer out of her custody because they were afraid of Sue. It was nothing like that. We cannot state that any stronger than that.
Exactly. If they're going to take Jennifer, they would have took Brandon too, and they didn't. They only took Jennifer.
That's exactly right. So these were things that were looked into. There was no basis for it, but because it was government work and it had something to do with Jennifer Perry, of course, she ended up going missing. That's why it is included in the FOIA. So if you're going to read it and you get to that part, I want to assure you that nothing ever came of any of that at all.
No.
At all.
No.
Okay. How has this affected you, Angela? You are Jennifer's older sister or big sister. You, of course, it's been 29 years now, almost. It'll be 29 years in July. How has this affected you? How did it affect you even afterwards? What influence this had on your life, and maybe if you can speak for your mother too.
I know it crushed my mother. My mother she still has a hard time with it. It's hard to talk about Jennifer with my mom because that's her baby, and how it's affected me. I was protective with my children, but I think I kind of learned not to be too overprotective because I didn't want my children to run away. I mean, I was even protective of my boys, you know, and my son didn't run away because he was just 14 and got with the wrong crowd. But I mean, I think of my sister all the time. Every single one of my children, they've never met their Aunt Jennifer, but they know her, like, they know her. They know my sister. Some of them have even named their children after her, you know, to keep her memory alive. So,
wow.
I missed my sister. We were close. She was excited that, you know, when I told her I was pregnant with my first daughter, she was so excited. I remember the day that I told her we were standing in front of the Kmart down there, and I told her that, you know, I was going to have a baby, and she got so excited. She's like, she picked me up because she was a little bigger than I was. So she just picked me up and swung me around. She was so excited she was going to be Aunt Jennifer. And yeah, it's really affected me. I mean, when my kids were little, I know this sounds funny, but when my kids were little, they used to watch Barney. And there was this one episode about sisters, and I literally sat there and cried through the whole episode. So I miss my sister. I really miss her.
Now, neither your mother nor yourself, or your brother, I believe, none of you live in Marathon anymore, but how long did you all stick around there before you moved away? And I have to ask, was it tough to move, knowing that is where Jennifer went missing?
I think it was more tough on my mom to leave than it was for myself. I had to look out for the best interest of my children and the situation that I was in at the time. I had to get out of there. Okay. So I think I left, I want to say maybe 2-3 years after she went missing. I was pregnant with my third daughter.
Okay. And your mother continued to live there a little longer?
A little bit longer, not like maybe 6 months longer than that, because I ended up, my husband at the time ended up going down and getting her and my brother, and she ended up coming and staying with us.
Okay. All right. Do you have a Facebook page or something set up for Jennifer's disappearance?
I did, and for some reason I can't remember my Facebook information.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't remember that information at all. It's been years ago I signed up with it, and I've been trying to get the password to it. My mom's trying to tell me to contact Facebook themselves, and I've tried that, and just, I don't know, but I think my mom has one.
Okay, I will make sure the listeners find out about it. If you're not on Facebook, having problems with the login or something, we'll try to get that figured out for sure. Yeah. For sure. And the listeners should know, I think that I need to thank my friend. She always gets mentioned every episode, but I'll mention her twice this episode. Megan Linez from the Charlie Project, I think, was the one who put me in touch with your mother in the first place.
Yeah, I think my mom told me. She called me the next day and told me about it. She was so excited.
Yes, I think that happened last summer. Megan contacted me. I don't know how Megan and your mother ran into each other.
I think there was a mistake on the Charlie Project, and my mom called and contacted her, and yeah.
Oh, is that how it happened? That's news to me. I don't think Megan's told me that. All right, so that's how that happened. And she said, there's this mother who lost her daughter to a disappearance back in 1993, and then that's eventually how your mother and I got to speak for the first time. And little did we know what we would find over the past 6 months, especially regarding the FOIA. I could have never guessed that when I first spoke to your mother back last summer. Okay. Angela, any final words before we complete this interview?
I can't think of anything.
Okay, that's totally fine. Of course, probably better than most guests. I've gotten to know you probably better than most of them, being that we've talked so many times, texted so many times, spoken to your mother, as you know, many, many times.
Yes, and
even
we all appreciate, your positive uh, words of encouragement towards my mom's health. We appreciate you checking on her and making sure she's okay. We appreciate everything you've done by getting the files for Jennifer and just being finally somebody that's willing to get my sister's story out there. We are so grateful for that.
you're very welcome.
Yeah.
You're very welcome. I will tell you that this is 236 disappearances, 237 disappearances. You just never know what you're going to run into.
Right.
You just never know. Some disappearances are very straightforward, and then there are others like Jennifer's where there are a lot of different possibilities.
Yeah.
And you never know where the information's going to come from. You think there's going to be a lot of information, there's not. You don't think there's going to be a lot of information, there is, and I think I would put Jennifer's in that category. I think everybody was surprised regarding this, regarding all the information. But I just try to do the best I can with any disappearance that's in front of me. And that's the way it was, and that's the way it will continue to be with Jennifer's.
Right, we really appreciate it. Honestly, we really do.
Well, you're very welcome, and I appreciate you being on this episode of Unfound.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And that was my January 10th, 2022 interview with Angela Perry, sister of Jennifer Perry. I thank her for joining me and all of you on this episode. During my work on this episode over the past 6 months, I also had a chance to speak with Sue, Jennifer's mother. She wanted to be interviewed, but Sue continues to have some health struggles from 2021. She is confident, though, that she will make a full recovery. I also spoke to Jennifer's younger brother, Brandon, who lived with her and Sue at the time. He was 9 years old when this all happened. Also, as was stated in the interview, I have made a video that is now available on the Unfound podcast channel on YouTube, where I point out the most important locations to understand Jennifer's disappearance. Once you see the area, you will truly understand how confounding Jennifer's case is. I'm now going to talk about the FOIA, this 600-plus page monstrosity that Monroe County sent me 6 months ago. And by the way, Monroe County, thank you. Thank you for being the most transparent and easy to work with law enforcement agency that I've encountered in the past 5+ years. If you haven't looked at Jennifer's file yet, go to theunfoundpodcast.com, go to Jennifer's page, and download the PDF file. Then you'll be able to follow what I'll be saying in a few moments. But even for your own education, your own passion for disappearances and solving them, you should read this file. In 600 pages, you can learn very quickly how disappearances can be so hard to understand, to solve, to investigate. The file covers about 20 years of work a variety of officers put in to figure out what happened to Jennifer. Okay, let's talk about this FOIA. I'm going to talk about it very much the way I do when I speak on the update episodes. I only have a few notes in front of me. Of course, the FOIA is 600-some pages long. I have read every page, but I'm surely not going to go through every page for all of you. And in fact, I'm really hoping that you will go to the Unfound website, theunfoundpodcast.com, and you will be able to download the file there. Please do. If you are really interested in disappearances and trust me, you're never going to see a FOIA paperwork regarding a disappearance as complete as this or as plentiful as this one is. So I'm going to do this the way I do the update episodes. I just have a few notes from some of the pages from the FOIA that I think are the most important pages, but I think there's a lot to be gained and learned from many of the other pages as well, even though there are some duplicate pages. But the pages that I've picked out either are noteworthy of either for their content on that page or because that page goes along with something in the interview that I did with Angela. So this is not scripted, so please forgive me if you hear some ums and you knows and things like that, because to actually type the script out of what I want to say about these particular pages would have taken hours and hours and hours. So I'm just going to take you first to page number 2, and you should realize that the FOIA is not in chronological order. When you go to the first page of this, the report, all these pages that were gotten, and I've been talking about this, all these pages since, August of 2021, and now here we are almost in February of 2022. They are not in chronological order. The first page you're going to see in the FOIA is not, for example, the report that was filled out in 1993 when Jennifer went missing. It's in there, and I'm going to eventually talk about it, but it is not the first page. And in fact, the information in this PDF file starts with an alleged sighting in 2002 in, of all places, Tampa, the Tampa area where I live. And in fact, a couple different places in the FOIA, it mentions some areas, not just in Tampa, but in actually Pinellas County, where I specifically live, which is Clearwater and St. Petersburg, Florida. So that is how this PDF file starts out. Something actually from 2002. By that time, Investigator Lawson, Deputy Lawson, was long gone, as was David Watson and many of the other deputies who were working there in 1993. So this was handled by different people. They were looking into if a sighting in the Tampa area what could have been Jennifer. They decided that it was not, but you should look at that. Next important page, we move up to page number 6. Once again, an alleged sighting. This is not that long ago, 10 years ago in 2012. We must remember that this disappearance took place in 1993. So almost 20 years after Jennifer went missing, they investigated an alleged sighting of Jennifer in Alabama. So you get to see that paperwork, what was done, and how it was determined that this woman was not Jennifer Perry, who went missing from Marathon, Florida on July 30th of 1993. But I think what this shows you is that police do take at least some of these types of sightings seriously. And this was work that was done that nobody in Jennifer's family knew about. They didn't know anything about any of it until I got this paperwork, this entire PDF file for them in 2021. So they went almost 30 years without knowing about some of these sightings and what the Monroe County Sheriff's Office did in trying to figure out if this was actually Jennifer or not. Of course, unfortunately, neither of those sightings ended up being true, being Jennifer. Next, we move up to page 13. And these, by the way, these page numbers are not on any of the paperwork. You will find the actual file. So if you have whatever your PDF viewer is that's open looking at this file, you will have to look up in maybe the left-hand corner to see what page it actually is, because there are no page numbers on the actual papers that have been copied. You will have to actually look at the PDF file, how the program is set up to see what page it is. But on the PDF file, and I think it's universal, so if mine says 13, I think it should say page 13 on yours as well. But page 13, what I thought was noteworthy is well after Jennifer went missing, a piece of paperwork, and for some reason they got Jennifer's sister's name wrong. Of course, her name is Angela. You just heard her interview. But for some reason, they called Jennifer's sister Shannon. I don't know what to make of that. Tried to find out, get to the bottom of that, could not. I just, at the time of the publication of this episode, could not figure out how that got messed up. The interesting part about that is you maybe already realize Shannon is the name of one of these people who was interviewed more than once regarding Jennifer's disappearance way back in 1993. Is that just a coincidence? I don't know. Shannon is a fairly common name. Maybe not many girls being born today are being named Shannon, but Shannon at one time, maybe around the Gen X generation that I'm in, Shannon was a very common name. So could it be a coincidence? Maybe. Or a Freudian slip of some type? I don't know, but that did catch my eye. And as you are looking for through the PDF file, you should examine that as well. Also, in that area of page 13, once again, they're talking about an alleged sighting in South Carolina. And in my opinion, this seems to be the sighting that where the Monroe County Sheriff's Office put the most work into it. Of all the alleged sightings mentioned in the PDF file, I think this is the one that gets the most pages. And unfortunately, it didn't end up being anything. Why it seems to have the most paperwork, you can judge that for yourself. It may be because they thought it was more serious than the others. Maybe it was because David Watson allegedly was moving to that area, and maybe there was some correlation there. I don't know. Once again, you can look at the PDF file and judge that for yourself. But right there, page 13, or shortly after page 13, an alleged sighting in South Carolina is mentioned. So already within the first 20 pages of this, we have an alleged sighting in the Tampa area, an alleged sighting in the Alabama area, and then an alleged sighting in the South Carolina area. Moving up. Now, once again, I'm skipping some pages. I would urge you to look at them. Like I said, I've looked at all of them, but I'm just trying to hit the very, very, very high points of a file that's 600-some pages long. So we're now going to move from page 13, from the pages in the teens, up to page 40. And finally, we get to see the original report that was filled out in 1993. This is when it appears. And what you will notice in one of those pages, on page 40, 41, 42, somewhere in there, you will see across the top how when they have this particular report that Monroe County sheriffs use, or deputies use, across the top, there's little letters they have to put in, questions that they have to answer themselves when they get on the scene. And at the time, Jennifer was classified as a runaway, no foul play suspected. Yes, she had done it before, and these are things that they mark off in these boxes. You will see it for yourself. I found this very interesting. Fingerprints, whether they were going to have access to any fingerprints, unknown at that time. And then what also caught my eye is that at least at the time that the report was filled out, that Monroe County did not collect a photo of Jennifer. Why is that? I don't know. Maybe it was because, being that she had run away before and then eventually come back, maybe they already had pictures of her from the previous times, maybe. Or they just didn't take it serious enough, thinking that she was going to return. Or they were in a hurry. We just don't know. But this no photo being given to Monroe County actually is mentioned a few different times in the whole 600-some pages. So you get to see the report, everything that was written. You will see, I believe it's Michael Lawson's handwriting, writing about what Sue told him about what happened that night. You can read all of that. That's where the original report is, right around that time. Now, in those next couple pages, 41, 42, 43, some of the addresses important to this disappearance are listed. And as I've already said in this episode, I've done a YouTube video so you can see these particular locations. And this is a disappearance that geography matters quite a bit because it is unique. And I knew I was going to have to do this map analysis. But those addresses are 101 11th Street of Marathon, Sombrero Road, the Eastwood Apartments. This is where a woman named Miriam was living, and I think that is the mother's name. But Jennifer, I think, was friends with Miriam's son, who lived with her in these apartments, and so that was a possible destination where Jennifer could be going. And then also mention once again in that area of page 41, 42, 43 is Angela's address at the time, and you will see it as 713 105th Street, Marathon, Florida. I did a video. You may want to check all of this out for yourself. So then we move up to page 46, just a couple pages later. Once again, Miriam Ventura is mentioned from the Eastwood Apartments, which are on Sombrero Road. And then there is this sighting. And I'm not doing any theorizing in this episode. I'm trying to treat this episode like all of the others that have been done on Unfound. But being that this is in the FOIA, it cannot be avoided. That allegedly on August 2nd, 1993, so 3 days. Remember, July has 31 days, so 31st, 1st, 2nd. Allegedly on August 2nd, 1993, Derek Freeman allegedly was seen driving a car with Jennifer inside. You know me. I don't know what to make of these sightings. Obviously, those 3 sightings mentioned at the beginning of this FOIA were untrue. You also know that sightings that occur after the accepted disappearance date, the odds of those being true, to remind all of you, very, very low. Very low. Not impossible. Just very, very low. And so when you read something like this, being that it's in an official FOIA that the Monroe County Sheriff's Office has filled out, it may lend you to think, oh, it must be true. You have to remember we have to always question the sources of this type of information. It very well may be true. It very well may be that Derek did something to Jennifer or drove her away and they lived happily ever after. But you just have to remember the odds of this being true. We don't know. We don't know who came up with this. It might have been somebody who's trying to get Derek in trouble for something, had a grudge. We don't know. And once again, we have sightings continued in the next few pages. Sightings, no proof of them. Shannon, her name, once again, comes up. And then we move on to page 55. And this is where it gets interesting. I don't know what the word is to use, but I'm not sure what to think of all of this. You had Investigator Lawson, Deputy Lawson, really, showing up, going to Shannon's property, searched the property because there was information out there that Jennifer was there. Then we have this woman claiming that Michelle was called by Shannon talking about Jennifer, something like that. And Michelle told Deputy Lawson she didn't even know Shannon. Why this woman was calling her, she doesn't even know. And you can read that in the paperwork. The next, Angela, Jennifer's sister, you just heard her interview, was spoken to by Monroe County Sheriff's Office. And she had heard that this woman, Natalie, of course, Natalie, Shannon, all these people were mentioned in the interview I just did with Angela. Natalie, who ended up marrying this other guy, a guy much older than her, said that Natalie said that Shannon has Jennifer. Deputy shows up, searches the property, no signs of Jennifer. I guess no signs that anyone else besides Shannon was living there. Shannon, of course, denies it. Then we have this guy, Lamont Warthaw, skipped out on his rent, and it seems like his landlord was saying, yeah, he skipped out right around the time that Jennifer went missing. And, maybe he took Jennifer. And I even have it here, and it's something that I just don't know what to make of. We have to remember that Jennifer was 13. All of these people that I've mentioned, Lamont, Derek, Michelle, Shannon, Natalie, all quite a bit older. Adults, all over 18 easily. So it's, and you get the feeling in looking at this FOIA that Jennifer knew all of them. Why did she know so many people who were so much older than she was? In addition, it's clear to me that Angela, who was 17 or 18 at the time, and of course Sue, Jennifer's mother, adults, hardly knew any of these people at all. I'm not sure what to make of that, but that's something that you should be thinking about looking at this FOIA. Moving on, we go to page 58. Finally, we have Sue's writing. Everything to this point has been other people talking, or Sue talking to the Deputy Lawson or some other person in the sheriff's office in person writing it down. Finally, we have Sue's writing. And in fact, you see any cursive writing, cursive, do they teach that in schools anymore? Any cursive writing you see in this FOIA was done by Sue herself at that time, way back in the 1990s and 1993. So please remember that. Sue's writing, lots of rumors. I even have here, it's so complicated. I think that's what you're going to see. Jennifer being here, Jennifer being there, Sue getting a lot of information through the grapevine about Jennifer being seen here, being seen there. And as we know, almost 30 years later, none of it has proven to be true. But that you finally get to see Sue's writing at the time, so it's in her own words. It's not somebody, which she's talking and then somebody's writing it, maybe missing every other word or something like this. This is an opportunity for Sue to write it all out herself, and you get to see what was going through her mind at the time. Moving on to then page 62, still lots of rumors, lots of sightings that didn't go anywhere. I'm not saying that one of them wasn't true. Of course, they couldn't all be true. Maybe one of them was true at most, and of course, none of them could be true. Then we move up. The next point in the FOIA that I thought was important, and given that we talked about it in the interview, was this courtroom story. That Jennifer was allegedly seen there, and what you also see in the FOIA, that the sheriff's office, Deputy Lawson, and others doubted this story, given how it could have happened and when it happened and everything else. I think that's maybe further down in the FOIA. But at that time, on page 83 is the first time this courtroom story comes up. This Elaine Howard that allegedly told this to Sue, or came from her, and then Sue got the information secondhand. What I think is most important, at least at the time, I don't know what has happened since, because it's not mentioned anywhere like from 1996 or 2000, 2005. And as we know, in this FOIA, there is information that goes right up to the 2010s, 2013. There's no information in there whether they actually tracked down Elaine Howard or not. But when this came out at the time in 1993, you will see that Elaine Howard was never located. So she might have been real and moved, or somebody was just making something up. Not located, or they talked to her and nobody ever filled out a report, or they talked to her and it wasn't what they thought. I don't know how to decipher that. But all we know is in the paperwork here that she was not located. Then we get to page 86, and then this is a very controversial part of this report. And what you get to see is that Jennifer called the police a lot on her mother and maybe her sister too. That's what you're seeing there. That long list on page 86. Now you should know, and this is very, very important to understand. Sue, Jennifer's mother, was never charged with anything, anywhere, anyhow. Ever. And you heard Angela in the interview talk about her mother and gave her, description of what was going on. In fact, as you heard Angela even mention, when she was younger, she was much like Jennifer, wanting to get out, running away. And as you could hear, Angela never blamed that on her mother. It just seems to me that both Angela and Jennifer were a couple of wild children. And it seems like the state of Florida tried to do its best with Jennifer, trying to get her some help, send her to this other place. And Angela said her impression was when Jennifer came back, she was better. We have to remember Angela was not living at home then at that time. But that is a long list of calls, complaints that Jennifer had about her mother, and none of it ever amounted to anything. Yeah, but I will tell you that this just shows you maybe how much the Monroe County Sheriff's Office looked into this, that they went back after Jennifer went missing and tried to see if her name had ever popped up on any other paperwork, and it did. And this is that paperwork. And you should know, I talked to somebody who is very familiar with the investigation into Jennifer's disappearance, and he told me that at no time was Sue Perry ever considered a suspect in her daughter's disappearance. That's what he told me. You can take that for what it's worth. We then move up to page 95, more sightings. We then can move up to page 105. There's a violent history between Sue and this Alejandro Salazar and others. Victims, long list. So it seems to me when all this information was being put together after Jennifer went missing that Monroe County just started going, would have been a computer, I guess, in 1993, probably. And just started pulling out anything regarding Jennifer, regarding Angela, regarding Sue, anything that had ever come into their office ever. And I think that's why a lot of this ended up in the file for Jennifer's disappearance. I think that's why it happened. But you could tell there was a lot going on at that time for Sue and her children. Going back 1992, 1991. Could that have something to do with Jennifer's disappearance? Maybe. I really don't know. Could it be that there was fallout from this somehow with some guy who used to be maybe Sue's boyfriend or something? I suppose, but there's no proof of any of that. But that may be going through your head. Move up to a page 130. And you will find Sue corresponding with posts on a website. And she talks about a deputy saying, she's very nebulous in typing out what she typed out that you will see. But we now know that, and this was talked about in the interview with Angela, that at some point, Angela had spoken to another deputy working for the Monroe County Sheriff's Office. And he said that if you really want to get to the bottom of what happened to Jennifer, the sheriff's office should be investigated. Although, once again, in this FOIA, at that section on page 130, she does not explicitly come out and say that. It might not be absolutely on actual page 130. It could be page 131, 32, 133, somewhere in there in those next few pages. But she doesn't come right out and say it was a deputy from the Monroe County Sheriff's Office, but that's who it was. Unfortunately, that guy is now dead. He died just a few years ago. I tracked him down. It was a little tough because the name that Sue had for him, she couldn't remember his last name, only the first name, and then it turned out that the first name he used was actually his middle name. Somehow I was able to wade through all of that and find out who he actually was. Unfortunately, he's deceased. If he hadn't been, I would have surely contacted him to say what he meant. Now, before you get all crazy with that, of course we know Michael Lawson has had a very turbulent life after Jennifer's disappearance. We know about David Watson, deputy, getting involved with drugs one way or the other once he moved out of the Florida area. And in fact, although I can't talk about it explicitly because it would give away who I was talking to, I was told I guess you could almost say funny story, almost darkly humorous, I guess we might say, about how David got caught trafficking in drugs. Anyway, so maybe there's something to what this guy said, being that we know about Watson, we know about Lawson, and then we also know about this Deputy Batson who went to Tallahassee. And if you've already seen that, I posted that picture in all of Unfound's locations so you could take a look at it. How he was eventually fired with having inappropriate conversations with girls once he was moved to the Tallahassee Police Department. He went up there. So I suppose you could think about that. But before you take it too seriously, we also have to think at the flip side. Could this guy have just been trying to angle? Did he just not like these guys? Did he really know that they were going to be bad guys eventually? Who knows? He may have just been angling to work his way up to sheriff and do so by getting other people fired. We don't know. Maybe he had a grudge against them. We don't know. Moving on, page 157. And we now have this report from 2008, and Sue was living there, and I guess Massachusetts State Police, they were helping Monroe County. They tracked Sue down to talk to her again about her daughter's disappearance, which at that point would have been 15 years old. And this is where you finally get to see how much Sue points the finger at David Watson. This is the guy who was talking to Angela and Jennifer and said, call me if you ever need help running away. And I have to admit, we talked about it, as you know, in the interview, but I'm not, I think the conversation happened. I'm not calling Angela a liar. I'm absolutely not. But I'm wondering, of course, we know David Watson ended up being a bad guy, but could he have meant that a different way? Did he really mean if you need help, I will help you run away? Or did he say, if you're thinking about running away, you just need some, help as in support, somebody to talk to, something like that. Obviously, Angela thought it meant that he was saying, yeah, if you ever run away, I can help you run away. But I will admit that's crossed my mind. I wasn't there. But as I'm writing out these notes, reading this report, that did cross my mind. Could this have, you could use the same words, but mean two different things. And then also, though, in this report that Sue talks about, she talks about how allegedly David Watson, the deputy, made a pass at her. And then she's saying that the reason she's theorizing that David Watson caused Jennifer's disappearance because she wouldn't go along with David Watson. You'll see that, once again, page 157, 158, 159, somewhere in there. What you also see in the report, once again, 158, 159, 160, in that area, is that this boy that Sue says Jennifer was talking to on the night of July 30th, 1993, he is named, and it's public record, so I can state it here. His name was Danny Moore. He was 14 years old. And in it, at least in this report from 2008, Sue goes on to say that she believed that Danny was part of a gang. And so you can see that. I think the issue about that is that this is not something that Sue mentions in her 1993 report, that she was down the street. She has said that Jennifer did not come in due to her curfew because she was talking to some friend down the street, but that friend is never named. There's never any allegations there's anything wrong with this boy who's around Jennifer's age, nothing like that. But then 15 years later, this comes up. Think that you need to decide for yourself what that means. It's very possible that this isn't something that Sue heard until later, or it just got left out of that report. Remember, at least part of that report, Sue did not write it herself. It was somebody else writing it down. But even when Sue had a chance to write about this, she did not write about this particular fact, if it's a fact, in 1993. But in 2008, she started talking about how this Danny Moore was in the Crips gang. I have to gauge whether, does it make sense that a 14-year-old would be in a Crips gang and vacation with his parents in Key West? And how would she even know that this boy was in that gang? How would that even ever come up ever? I don't know. So you have to think about that. Also in those pages going into the 160s, the courthouse story pops up again, and more allegations are made during the sheriff's office. As we talked about in the interview, I wouldn't say the allegations are crazy. I think it's one of several different possibilities regarding Jennifer's disappearance. And then even in the report for the investigation that somebody did in the Monroe County Sheriff's Office, they also looked up David Watson and Michael Lawson and found exactly what I did in 2021 into 2022, that these two guys, after they were out of the Monroe County Sheriff's Office, that their lives did not go very well. Once again, David Watson is deceased. Michael Lawson is still alive. And then you get up to page 170, and there's a lot of talk about DNA, about NamUs, a lot of addresses, and things like that. So, and the FOIA goes to about 640 pages, something like that. Some of it is duplicated, and you maybe have to wade through that. A lot of database stuff. But I think you should look at it in its entirety. I hope you will download it and read it when you have the time. I think it's good exercise because, trust me, I just don't see us ever getting a FOIA that this big with this much information. And as Sue and Angela mentioned, a lot of the stuff that was done, they didn't even know it went on over the years. So this, I think you have to remember that as we move forward into more disappearances, that when families say, well, they don't look like they're doing anything, the police don't look like they're doing anything, it very well may be that the department is. That doesn't mean they're getting anywhere. As it seems with Monroe County, they were doing things, and it wasn't getting them any closer to finding Jennifer. But it seems when information came in that they would give that information a pretty good shot to see, where it goes. So please look through all of it. Please download it. I think it's important. And you can judge all of the information in it and combine that with the interview with Angela to try to start your own theory as to what happened to Jennifer Perry on July 30th of 1993. So now I will go back to some scripted comments, and then this episode will finish. And those are some of the main sections, not all of the sections, but some of the main sections from the file on Jennifer's disappearance. Probably the hardest part to understand is, in the past 45 years, only one teenager has gone missing in Monroe County and stayed missing: Jennifer. What was it about her, that night, her situation, or whatever else that caused her disappearance? In contrast to presumably many other teenage girls who ran away at one point or another in Monroe County over the past 4 decades, who came home or were found alive in a few days. What made Jennifer different? I don't have a good answer. What I'm saying is all of the shady people mentioned by Angela, who are also cited in the file, seem to be perfectly capable of causing a teenager's disappearance. Certainly. Yet, if one or a few of them are responsible, why do we not have more child disappearances in Monroe County? I suppose we could say the same of the deputies mentioned. I will say this, though. Lamont Warthaw, who is mentioned in Jennifer's file, has an extensive criminal record, and in particular had a very horrible July 1993 in Monroe County, including assault. Still, what would cause someone to just break a rule once? Or maybe no rules or laws were broken at all. I'll leave the theorizing up to you. And that's the program. If you found it informative, please go to the app that you use to listen to Unfound and give this podcast a nice review. I thank you for listening. I'm Ed Dentzel, and you've been listening to Unfound.